Hello and welcome to Radical with me, Amol Rajan. On this week's episode, I interview the extraordinary Jacob Dunne, who in 2011 threw a single punch which killed a man. He was sentenced to 2.5 years for manslaughter and since then has been on the most astonishing journey. He has been in touch with the parents of the man he killed and embarked on an idea, a radical idea, which he thinks could transform Britain's criminal justice system. It's called restorative justice. It involves victims and perpetrators coming together, and he thinks it's an idea whose time has come. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jacob Dunne. Jacob, it is really great to meet you, and it's especially great to meet you because I've seen the play, I've heard the Radio 4 series, and by the way, let's just get this out of the way. It all comes, the fact that you're here now, well, there's a real world event which we'll come to, but it was a Radio 4 series which I just could not stop listening to a few years ago, commissioned by the now controller of Radio 4, Mohit Bakaya. And the play which is on, lots of people have seen, it's called Punch, written by James Graham, comes from that Radio 4 series, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's so remarkable, like what Radio 4 can do, in terms of telling bold stories, commissioning brave pieces of content or radical podcasts.
Radical podcast, yeah, that's very good. I think we're going to get on. How have you found the whole experience of your experience being turned into a kind of national event? And now it's on Broadway. I mean, we were sitting here, it's your play, or James Graham's play about you and your life is on Broadway. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's nuts. And we've had some historians digging around, and apparently it's the first new play ever to open simultaneously in Broadway and the West End.
Wow.
So I'm massively humbled that this is the story that does it, especially in the times we're in, where division and polarisation and populism is on the rise. And this is a play about how we can bridge the divides and come together and find ways forward.
Do you feel comfortable? Do you enjoy even talking about not just the experience of the play, but that night in July 2011? Have you spoken about that much? Have you done interviews about it? Do you feel like all right to talk about it?
Yeah, I feel all right talking about it. I like, but the same way, because the story is essentially how you move through and beyond and find ways forward. And so sometimes I don't like staying in the past or talking about without the kind of direction moving to forward in a positive way. Some people can get sensationalized and want to stick on kind of what happened, but that's only the first question in the restorative process.
Well, let's, exactly in the spirit that you suggest, let's start, if you like, at the end. What is restorative justice?
Restorative justice is where you bring together perpetrators of crime to meet or talk, have a dialogue with victims of crime with the intention of finding a way forward and getting everybody's needs met in a positive way. So it's not about necessarily shaming or being punitive, but it's about expressing the harm, identifying what the victim's needs are, essentially. Before you can even go ahead, a restorative justice practitioner will do a needs and risk assessment to identify what the victim needs, and that could take a variety of forms. It could be to find that pieces of the puzzle together about what happened and why they were targeted.
And why is restorative justice the radical idea that we need in Britain right now?
Because it's about, if you look at restorative justice in the micro, you look at my story in the micro, that's what's happening right now on the stage. But what we want to do is broaden that out to the macro and what that has to say. And the macro is about how we find the common ground across the political divides and whatever other divides are being thrown up right now. How can we, if Jacob, David and Joan can find common ground and move forward and stand together and campaign together after what they went through, then how can we not find common ground?
David and Joan being the parents of James Hodgkinson, who died in July 2011. Does restorative justice work?
Yeah, it works. It has for every £1 spent, it saves the taxpayer £14. It has up to 27% reduction in reoffending, and 8 in 10 victims of crime that go through restorative justice would recommend it to somebody else.
27% reduction in reoffending. Just to make people understand, when you've got a crisis where you're having to spend billions, as we currently are in this country, on new prisons, when you have a prison population which is well over the mid-80s thousand, reoffending is just an astonishingly stupid use of public resources. You know, if people go to prison, you want them to become less likely to reoffend. Actually,
Yeah.
a lot of the evidence suggests, to use an old phrase, that prisons are so-called colleges of crime, and we'll get into some of that because you've been to prison. If you can reduce reoffending by 1%, you're going to make savings that compound massively over the years and improve lives. If you can reduce reoffending by 27%, that would be an astonishing, never mind the moral gain, but the financial gain is enormous.
Whatever lens you look through, economic, victims' needs being met, rebuilding trust in the justice system, whatever metric, reducing reoffending.
It's worth saying as well, victims-wise, 62% of victims felt that restorative justice made them feel better after an incident in crime. Just 2% felt it made them worse. Given these very compelling statistics, why does it seem to be the case now that there's a kind of retreat from restorative justice? I was just reading a piece online before we began this conversation suggesting that from Whitehall, from the Ministry of Justice, the Civil Service, restorative justice is sort of accepted in principle as a good idea, but the practical resources aren't flowing as they maybe should.
Yeah, it's baffling really, because it doesn't make any sense. The only explanation would be that they don't think it's what the public wants, which is the problem with justice reform for the last 30 years. And so what we've done, which is the radical idea, and David and Joan are our senior advisors, is we've set up the Common Ground Justice Project to solve this issue with criminal justice policy and criminal justice reform, because we've been stuck with all the charities, all the third sector, all the research, all the data, as we're talking about now, and it gets boring. People have been lobbying for justice reform. We all know what works in terms of reducing reoffending. We all have 30 years plus of criminologic literature about desistance of crime and what works, but nothing changes. And we believe that the only reason that we can actually, we know what works, now we've just got to match that with what the public wants. So we founded the Common Ground Justice Project, which is about a national listening exercise. We poll in the public, we're listening to the public, we want to know exactly, we want to test policies with the public, we want to understand what they want from their justice system. And then we can go to the government and say, okay, we know what works, but this is what the public actually wants. And try and match that gap, which is keeping the justice system and victims and offenders, perpetrators of crime, stuck in this cycle of pain and trauma and misery.
There is some access to restorative justice now, though, isn't there?
There is access to restorative justice now. And most police and crime commissioners commission a restorative justice service provider. So no matter where you are in the country, if you want to take part in restorative justice, there will be a local service provider, and we've launched a campaign called the Right to Be Heard campaign, which is to make sure that all victims, to raise the profile of restorative justice, but to also make it a legal right for all victims of crime to be offered it and offered a referral to their local service provider. Because at the moment, only 1 in 20 victims of crime are offered or can recall being offered restorative justice, even though it is a right of theirs in the Victims Code, but it's just not a legal right.
I want in a minute to go back to where all this comes from, but before we do, a little birdie tells me that the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy has taken a close interest in your play, as well he might, given it's a big hit. What's your sense of where the kind of politics of this is at the moment?
I don't know where the politics are. I'm somebody that's, just wants to engage in constructive conversations. I'm not a hostile individual. I'll lobby and I'll, make a lot of noise. And yes, David Lammy came to see the play last night, and he's invited us to the Ministry of Justice, and so we will start the dialogue as we will. We'll have a restorative conversation, hopefully, and we'll present the facts and we'll explore how we can work together. And it's a common sense policy, because if we want to rebuild trust in the justice system, 9 in 10 victims of crime don't have confidence in the justice system. People don't trust the police. If we want to rebuild trust and improve trust within policing, within the justice system, and people's experiences of justice, we need to make sure that victims have the best experience possible.
Is it expensive? Is that one of the arguments why it's not happening?
It's not expensive. It's just somebody saying, a victim liaison officer or whoever the first port of contact is with the justice system, making you aware of restorative justice and offering you a referral. At the moment, referrals are really low. And so there's capacity in the system for more referrals.
It's worth saying, of course, if you can reduce reoffending, it will more than pay for itself in time. You might pay up front for the liaison.
And the other reason why I don't think it's a policy issue is because it's not about supporting perpetrators of crime, which is sometimes like, oh, you're just trying to help the offenders, right? This is about putting victims in the centre of the justice system.
Well, let me put to you then the criticism, because this is the former Tory MP, Dunne Davidson. She was an MP in the last Parliament, has now left parliamentary politics. Her dad died in 2007 at the age of 35 from one punch. And her argument was that, I think, to not quite quote her, but nearly quote her, she said, it depends on what price you put on life. And the argument she was making is that sometimes letting people out after 2.5 years was soft on crime.
Yeah.
And actually, if people with one punch kill someone, they should do much longer behind bars.
I would probably agree that if it was me or someone I knew, I would want them to be in prison for longer. But it depends on what you want to achieve from prison.
Retribution.
If you only want to be retributive,
there's individual retribution, which is revenge, but there's social retribution, which is justice. Retribution at the social level, deterrence, keeping the public safe.
Yeah, I think prison's very effective at keeping prison's very good at keeping the public safe, but it's not very good at deterring people. It doesn't work in terms of a deterrence. It does work in terms of protecting the public, and there are people in prison that are a danger to the public. I've met them. They are, they shouldn't be out in the public. So I'm not an abolitionist, right? But in terms of the deterrence argument, doesn't work, because it only works if you have something worth living for, or a career, or a child, But if most of the prison population have their livelihood stripped from them, the longer they're in there, the less they have to fight for when they're released.
In a way, the subplot, or maybe it's the main plot of your life story, as dramatised in Punch, which actually ends 6 or 7 years ago, is that, I think, you tell me if I'm wrong here because I'm talking about you and projecting a bit, but you went from a sense that you didn't have much to live for to actually having a hell of a lot to live for.
Yeah.
And you're here, someone who, not just because of your 2 children, but because of your education now and because of this cause, feels like you've got a lot to live for. But that wasn't always the case. And actually, watching the play, one of the strongest, let me just say up front, James Graham's done an amazing job. Everyone knows he's a phenomenal writer. Dear England, This House and So Inc. and so on. He's an amazing writer. The acting is off the charts. A guy called David Shields, who's from Derbyshire, plays you, and it's astonishing. And I had a very, very, very strong sense. It's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about before we get to July 2011. I had a very strong sense of where you grew up, in Nottingham.
Yeah.
And you grew up on an estate called The Meadows. And
sounds nice, doesn't it?
It sounds nice, doesn't it? It wasn't that nice. And we were discussing earlier, I think you may know, I've got a huge interest in kids in poverty. It's one of the great sort of passions of my life to try and help kids from really, really tough backgrounds escape poverty. Could you just tell me a little bit about your life before July 2011? So tell me a little bit about The Meadows. What was life like there and growing up?
So there's a River Trent that runs through the Meadows and divides a suburban area on the other side to the Meadows on one side. And I can throw a stone over the river. Well, I used to be able to. I'm not sure now. And the life expectancy is nearly 10 years higher on the other side. But it was a social experiment, and the play kind of talks about the importance of social architecture and city planning as well, and how architecture can breed crime. And so I think we describe it in the play as it's a bit of like it's a warren and a maze, and there's
Nooks
underpasses
and crannies, little places.
like you can get from one side to the other without being picked up by the CCTV, and it's just like
It becomes a territory.
it becomes a territory, and the metaphor we use in the play is our backs are to the wall, our backs are to the world, because it's not typical streets where the houses face the road. The houses have got their backs to the road and they look out across green spaces, and you can, and so it's like kind of you can feel cut off from the world,
And it creates a sort of intensity and a kind of claustrophobia almost. That becomes your universe. I absolutely want to be clear about this. I'm not in any way overstating my experiences growing up. I didn't grow up in poverty, but because of work I've done in the charity sector, I've spent a lot of time in estates, including estates, by the way, very close to central London, where the life expectancy is, yes, 10 or more years younger than people who live less than a stone's throw away. And I think it's one of the great stories of modern Britain that you get this extraordinary juxtaposition of extreme wealth with extreme poverty. One of the things about these estates, when I've spent a lot of time there, is that you very often don't really have many figures of adult authority. Now, you grow up in a nice suburban street in, I don't know, Richmond, West London. There's lots of figures of adult authority. They're called parents.
Yeah.
And when you don't have adult authority, other forms of authority come in.
Yeah.
Gangs, and there's an honour code that go with them. So when you're a young guy, was your mum alcoholic from when you were very little?
She, not that I'm aware of, she was a functioning alcoholic throughout my teens.
Right.
And I probably suspect not long after the divorce.
That might have been when she
That's
took
when
it up.
she like maybe, yeah.
So when you're young, when you're sort of like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, you're in the meadows, your dad's not around, your mum may or may not be sort of developing alcoholism. Did you care for school much? That's a naughty smile.
I cared for, like, I just didn't really have any, as you say, role models or trusted adults that could model what education could do for me. My school was it had just reopened, so there was no older year groups. There was one older year group. So when I first started in year 7, there was only year 8s in the school, and I also was quite a paranoid young person in terms of, and I think lots of young people are, to be fair, is just in terms of like fitting in. And because my mum had put me in a primary school in that good neighbourhood in the other across the river, so I was mixing with like children with two stable homes, and go around there and it's like sitting at the dinner table and that, you know what I mean, and you're having dinner and stuff, right? So whereas like when I went to secondary school, I go to my mates' houses and it was more like mine, and it was like a bit more dysfunctional. My mates getting whacked with the spatula, you know what I mean, but it was fun. It was fun at the same time, because I go to one mate's house and I'm having curry, and then I'm having mutton at my other mate's house, and and we're all kind of like these like lost boys, basically, like just having fun and teaching each other how to grow up. And we've all got these women in our households.
Strong
not
women.
many strong women, like amazing women. But I heard the analogy the other day. It's like, I sometimes like feel bad, like, because I don't want single parents to feel like it's stigmatized, because I love them to bits. Like, they're doing such a good job in our society against all the odds. But it's like driving a car with one hand. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's certain bends where you're going to find it a bit tricky.
But this life that you evoke, you don't. I mean, you're being, it's in that classic way. I hear this so often, see it so often. You're doing it now, totally understandable. You don't want to present yourself as having a hard knock life. You're being humble about it. But look, it's the objective facts are you grew up in a not particularly rich family. Your parents divorced when you were 7. Your mum got into alcoholism. The Meadows is a pretty tough area. You weren't that into school.
And then I was diagnosed in like year 8, 9 with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and used all of those diagnoses as an excuse not to apply myself academically.
Do you feel a bit ashamed that you used it as an excuse now?
I don't feel ashamed of the 14-year-old me who didn't understand the way his brain worked.
So how did those diagnoses affect you, do you think?
They just gave me an excuse not to be accountable or not to apply myself. And but this is all about the conditioning of the young people or people in my state. So when people in working class communities up and down the country, there's a narrative of your community, of what you can achieve. There's a ceiling as to kind of what you can do, what you can say, where you can go in the world, and you stay where you are, and you trap, and you sell drugs, or you stay in your box, because there's nothing else out there for you. And so you develop this pessimistic view of the world with this undertone of anger and resentment that, you know, deep down there may be some, like, that little boy who wanted to be, ironically, a policeman or something. Do you know what I mean?
It could be anything. You could
be whatever it was. I want to go to
a footballer.
yeah.
You could be anything.
You know what I mean? Those little dreams, right? And then all of a sudden they're just like crushed by the time you get to secondary school.
Why is it that, and it's not just boys, of course, it's girls as well, but why is it that the dreams of a generation of young people growing up in poverty with family breakdown, endemic crime, just dreadful facilities available to them, what is the mechanism by which those dreams are crushed?
It's a methodical process of daily experiences and people's judgments of them and the way people react to them constantly. A consistent, you're bad, you're naughty, you won't achieve anything. People like us don't go to university. All of that language and the way people react to you, the way people respond to you has a compounding effect, and it embeds itself in your subconscious to the point where even if you have a thought of, you know what, maybe I should go back to college, like the first thing that pops into your head is, oh no, I can't do that.
How old
I'm
were
not
you?
very academic.
How old were you when you started selling drugs?
I was about 14.
And a bit of coke or a bit of
Coke was a bit later on.
a bit later on. So it was weed to begin with.
Weed to begin with, yeah.
And
just to kind of survive. That period in time was kind of like I don't want to use the word seminal moment, but it was like a really important time when history books come out. You know, for another, like, we tried to do it in the play, but in a few years' time, people are going to be looking back at that 7, 8, 9, 10.
Well, there's a financial crash and then the summer riots.
The financial crash, you've got Facebook, you've got social media, you've got you got people starting to, the rise of knife crime, different strains of weed, you know, with all these
Huge social
things going on, huge social change going on. And I went to secondary school with no phone and left with a smartphone. Do you know what I mean? Like, by the time I was 16, I had a smartphone.
And when you're in it, you can't see it. It's only later on you understand how kind of the foot was put to the accelerator of history in a way that we don't necessarily kind of understand.
Because what I try to explain in what happened in that time as well, which we can see with the rise of knife crime and the way gang culture is now, is back then, before that kind of phase, that curve, whatever we want to call it, the postcode, everybody, I was from the Meadows, right? I didn't have a big family. It was just me, my mum, and her sisters, and my nan. And my mum was adopted with her twin sister. And so even though I didn't have, like, family, because there was lots of Jamaicans and Asian families, and they had, like, massive family, like, that's my cousin, and I was the white guy in the group. So, do you know what I mean? I was the white guy in the group. But I was accepted because I was from the Meadows. You know, anyone, if you're from the Meadows, you're from the Meadows, right? And it's this waterfront gang and waters, man. And it was like, there was this, it doesn't matter where you're from the ends, like, you're one of us. But then, as social media started to come online and, like, it started to fracture. And then there was, like, Arkwright Walk was one side of the estate, Bosworth Walk was the other side of the estate. Then they were warring. And I lived on one side, but all my friends were on the other side. So I was like...
You had to cross the battlefield.
So I had to cross the battlefield, like, every day just to go and see my friends and come back. And it was like, and then all of this, like, and then it became like 3 or 4 cliques within the same neighborhood. And then the waterfront gang, or the Meadows gang, Waters, man, like, just literally dissolved. And that's the same everywhere you go now. It is like, there might be gangs, but there's gangs within gangs, and it's just become so fractured and fragmented now and that's why, that's the reason for the knives, because people don't feel safe. And they used to feel, like, when I was younger, people carried knives when they went to another area.
Did you?
Yeah, occasionally. Or I'd get given a knife, because I'd have a friend, he's got like 3 knives on him, and I'm like, what the he's like, oh, this one's for you, this one, like, passing them around. And I'm like, and I remember always feeling like really uncomfortable and being like, because there's a scene in the play where my character gets given a knife and he's like, no, that's not for me, because it wasn't what it.
That was an
really,
important thing for you to know, that you to register that you even back then felt uncomfortable.
Yeah, I felt really uncomfortable.
Knife crime. I'll tell you something weird. It's going to sound immature, but I'd say it anyway. I've worked with a lot of kids who've been exposed to that sort of thing. Some of them have been through it. I cannot get my head around the psychology of shanking, to use a phrase, or slashing someone.
Yeah.
I don't understand how 13-year-old, 14-year-olds can do it. I know there's a lot of exposure to violence online. I know that on social media you can get access now to the most horrific footage, but I find it very, very hard to understand how people that young can be comfortable with something. I can understand.
But do you know what
holding
it is?
Go on.
It's the whole purpose of this entire podcast. It's about relationships. The quality of relationships,
Of course,
equals the quality of life.
Of course.
And if you haven't grown
That's true
up,
of the dustman and the duke. That's true of the
It's
billionaire.
everyone.
That's true of every celebrity you've ever heard of. You measure the success and the happiness of your life by the depth and quality of your
yeah.
relationships.
And if you don't have any quality of relationships, you won't find it hard to stab someone, because you don't care about anyone. You don't care about yourself. If you've been exposed to love and kindness consistently by people, you find it harder to want to harm anybody else.
One of the things that the points of the Radio 4 series, which by the way, it's called The Punch. It's on BBC Sounds. I think it's 5 15-minute episodes. I'm going to say hand on heart. I'm not getting paid to say this. Trust me. It's probably the best short series I've ever heard of anything audio formats. Absolutely gripping. It's your story. You narrate it, and it begins and ends with your the sound of your wonderful one child back then.
Yeah.
But one of the points that it made very, very strongly was that at this time when you were going out, you were very conscious of this honour code. You're part of a gang. And it's a bit like, it's a bit like NATO. If one of you's punched, then everyone's punched.
Yeah.
And there was a line which really jumped out at me where you say you were going out, and it was almost like you're kind of looking for a fight, but more you were up for the fight.
Yeah.
And you go out of a night, just once in a while, even though you felt uncomfortable, you had a knife on you. There was this unspoken thing that if someone gets hit, one of your guys, one of your boys gets hit, then you've been hit and you're going to hit back.
You always step in.
Tell me about the other elements of that honour code. What else did belonging to one of the waterfront gangs in the Meadows involve?
I think it was just, like I said before, we've touched on a few reasons why, where all this forms. Like we didn't have positive male role models. We didn't have quality relationships. We weren't exposed to loving, consistent, kind males and vulnerability, being able to be vulnerable. We didn't have quality relationships. We had this ceiling of a narrative that we were all given from our postcode of what we could achieve and who we were. And you just put all this into the pot, and it's just you and your guys against the world, and nobody else really matters. And so if anybody is aggressive or violent or disrespectful to one of my friends, we've all got to have each other's back, because no one else has got our back.
Well, this takes us to July 2011. And before we talk about that, can I just say something? I was so struck in what you said at the beginning of this podcast that you don't want to ever sensationalise it. And actually, I think one of the things that the play does very well is it doesn't sensationalise it. In a way, it's a moment and it's gone.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know, and I'll say it here in front of this microphone, that I've spent 20 years trying to fight sensationalism in journalism, and I don't believe in it. So I'll be led by you to a very large extent when you talk about it, and you tell me at the point at which you're kind of thinking it's getting too sensational. But obviously, people need to understand what you've been through and why restorative justice matters so much. And I think that the way to do it is to let you describe it in your own words. So July 2011, this extraordinary backdrop. I hadn't really thought about that period in history, but now you mention it, of course.
Yeah.
Financial crash, panic, recession, election of a coalition government, which is a novel idea, smartphones, social media, it's austerity, hot summer, riots in 2011. There's a lot happening in the national story, and there's a lot happening in your life. Meanwhile, at home, your mum's drinking, your younger brother, who we'll get to, is having a tough time. Meanwhile, a chap called James Hodgkinson goes to watch the cricket at Trent Bridge with his dad, David, and they go on a bit of a pub crawl afterwards, and they've had a lot to drink. And then David goes home And James goes to a separate bar on his own. Is that right?
No, they were both out together still.
They're both out
Yeah.
together still. And what happens next? You get a message.
I was out with my friends. It was one of my friends' birthdays, 18th birthday.
How old are you at this point?
I'm 19.
Okay.
And I got split up from my friends and then got a call. And then on the call, my friend was like, it's kicking off, come down. And then as I've kind of already explained, like, it's my mate, you know what I mean? I've got to be there for him. You always step in.
Were you drunk or high?
I was drunk and on all sorts of, probably cocaine. It's a bit of a blur. I was out like all day drinking and celebrating my friend's birthday and high on life and other substances. And by this point, I was like 1 a.m. or something at the end of the night, and just went down to the scene where my friends were. Was in no fit state to be kind of judging or getting a sense of what was going on. And just ran in and threw a punch. I saw one of my friends like being aggressive towards another individual.
Not James.
With his fist. It was James with his fist clenched.
So James,
my friend had his fist clenched.
And what was James?
James wasn't being aggressive.
So
back.
you thought
I was looking at my friend going, he's trying to attack him, so I've got to attack him. That's the kind of, in a split moment, I'm looking at my friend, I'm seeing him, like, so surely this person's, like, in my head, something's happened, but nothing did happen. And obviously that's my biggest regret that I live with now, is that I didn't say, is it worth it? I didn't pull my friend away and say, leave it. Well, someone else pulled my friend away. And then I ran in and saw it as my responsibility to be aggressive instead. And then just ran off, didn't realise anything that had happened. James's dad, David, chased me. I wasn't even aware that he chased me. Ran home back to the meadows. And then, didn't think of it. Didn't even think of it. Well, the next day, my friends came round. Were like, "Oi, one punch." Knocked him out 1 punch. And I was like, oh, proud of it. You know what I mean? Like, we were all like, if we'd knocked someone out, you'd be like, you get brownie points for it, basically. Stripes on the points on the scorecard. And that's how you kind of earn your respect as friends, which was it's just backwards. You know what I mean? But that's what happens when you grow up in those environments with all those things we've talked about, is that you develop those loving relationships through fear and intimidation. And that's how you earn respect. You don't, because we're not being, and I don't like making excuses, because there's no excuse for throwing punches or carrying knives or being aggressive, but everything has a context.
I think there's absolutely no doubt you're not someone who's here making excuses. And, for people who haven't got to this bit of the story or don't know your story, you went to prison and did 2.5 years, I think. So, you didn't make excuses then and you haven't since. But just let me ask you one thing explicitly, which I'm sure you got asked in the court of law as well. But when you threw that punch, you were high, you weren't totally with it. But you wanted to hurt him, but did you want to kill him?
No, I didn't want to. I don't think I've ever wanted to kill anybody. Like, and that sounds like a weird thing to say, but like, there are people that are like, that I know. Like, there's a lot of people that I know growing up, like wanted to seriously harm people and kill people.
And not you.
But not me. Like, I never like had that level of hatred towards anyone. It was more fun and games, I guess.
Was James killed by the impact on the floor, or was he? Because there was a bleed on the brain.
Yeah.
And people, especially if they go back and listen to the Radio 4 series, will know he went to hospital. They said to his dad, which is one of the things that so hurt David, that they said he's just drunk, let him sleep it off. But then it was revealed that he had a bleed on the brain and he deteriorated very quickly and he died a few days later. His parents had to make the decision to switch off the life support machine. But it was the impact on the ground as well as your punch, wasn't it? It was a combination of two things.
It was the trauma of the impact on the floor to the skull, which was which caused the bleed on the brain and everything that happened subsequently.
How long was it between running back to the meadows, waking up, you presumably come round, you think, I punched someone last night. That was a heavy hit. How long after that did you hear that something dreadful had happened?
A month. A month later. Took the police a month to find me and my friends.
So you didn't know he was dead?
I didn't know anything. I didn't know that anything had happened. It wasn't in the news. There was nothing.
So you weren't even trying to hide from the police?
I wasn't even trying. No, I went on holiday with my mum, who'd been saving up to take us on holiday. Me, my little brother, and her. We went to Tenerife for a week. This was like 2 weeks after it happened. So like 2 weeks after I threw the punch, we went on holiday for a week to Tenerife, thinking nothing of it. If anything had happened, we would have heard about it by now. And that happened every weekend to someone.
Had you ever punched anyone before?
Yeah.
In similar circumstances?
Similar circumstances. It was always like on nights out. And I'd been attacked like multiple times, or like woke up like bottled on the floor and a mate's like dragging me across the floor, or like...
Because you were getting into fights a lot, you and your mates were getting... Not just you, but
getting into fights a lot, but it was just because we would just like loiter around at the end of the night with loads of other drunk teenagers. Do you know what I mean? Or in McDonald's, do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, someone kicks off and like all of a sudden there's like a brawl going on outside the... Do you know what I mean? Like that's where all the drama happens.
So you go on holiday, come back from Tenerife, and what, is it, knock on the door?
I got a phone call from a friend he was the only friend, he was the one whose birthday it was, and he's Raph in the play, and Alec plays him. And
to be clear, there's I think there's about 5 or 6 characters in the play. David Shields plays you, and then several different parts are played by
an ensemble of 6. Yeah,
an ensemble of 6. Sorry, you got the posh. You got the Radio 4 word. God, you're fully Radio 4 now, Jacob. Jeez, goodness me. He's got the ensemble of 6 and a brilliant. Let's give his name out because he's absolutely mesmerising in the play. Alec Bowden. Alec Bowden, sorry, plays a number of different parts, including your brother, and he plays your real mate Raph as well.
Yeah, and I got a call. He was the only one that had a job, and he was trained to be an electrician. And the police had raided his house, but he was at work, and then so he rang everyone and said, the police have raided my house, like. And I was like, well, why are you telling me? He's like, well, I've got a funny feeling it might be about that night that you threw that punch. And I was like, what? What night? And then he planted a seed in me, and I was like, well, no, what's he going on about? And then, so then I got out of bed, I was like, what's going on? Just like started getting paranoid, left the house, started like trying to find out what was going on. And then like rumours were coming through, like other people were being raided. Another friend had been arrested, and then through the grapevine there was like one of my friends has been arrested for murder. I think someone's died, and I'm like, this is insane. Like this can't be happening. Like surely this is like sort of another night or someone else. And then I got the phone call from my mum, and the police were in the house, and they're saying, Jacob, nothing to worry about. Just come and hand yourself in, mate. Just following up on an investigation. Obviously, I already know that there's something much bigger going on. And went and handed myself in at the police station, and that's when it was confirmed that I was being arrested on suspicion of murder, and that someone had died.
But in those days when the rumour mill started kind of bubbling away, and people saying, actually, someone's actually died here. There's some, people have been raided. Raph has been raided, your mate. You must have had something close to rising panic.
Oh, my gosh.
What was that like? Tell me about this.
Absolute dread. Horror. Surprise. Shock. Oh, awful. Awful. Awful feeling. And just disbelief. Just like, no. Like, no, not me. Like, this fucking much crazier mates that walking around with knives and stabbing people and that, like, and I'm the one. I'm just the average guy in the meadows. Do you know what I mean? I didn't try to act like I was the baddest man. I wasn't trying to be the leader of the gang. I was just the guy on the fringes who had nowhere else to go, who was just fitting in where he is in his community and with his peers. But that's the cautionary tale, is you don't have to be the maddest man. You can get caught up in anything. If you whether you're on the peripheries or not, you can get caught up in one moment of madness, and all of a sudden you're being sucked into the criminal justice system.
But also, you must have thought so much. Could that one punch have killed him?
Yeah,
Where did you
I didn't
hit?
even realise it could. There was one incident in Nottingham a few years before mine. Bless the family. Where the same thing happened. He fell over, hit his head on a tram lines, and died. And I remember going, "Oh, that would never happen to me." And it did.
Did you think when you'd hit him that it was a particularly brutal hit?
No, I'd rather not think about it in too much detail.
Because I would have thought that in those days of rising panic and dread, part of you would be thinking, I was just a punch.
Yeah, that was definitely that's what was the surprise and the panic was like, no, how could this happen to me? Like, what are the chances of all the punches that get thrown around the country every week? That my punch was the one.
That was part of your calculation for handing yourself in, that you thought, obviously it's all going to be on CCTV, you couldn't pretend it wasn't you.
Yeah, I was in the middle of the town centre.
RAF had been raided, some of your mates...
friends had been raided.
Witnesses
they already had some information to know who we were, or that it was to even arrest me.
So what was your calculation in handing yourself in? Did you think that by doing it, you could say...
It was just because I had no other options. And I had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to go on the run. I had no resources, no money. May as well just go and face the music. And I knew my friend was in there on suspicion of murder. They thought it was him.
RAF?
Another friend. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and I went and handed myself in. All his family was outside the police cells, and were basically saying respect to you, Jacob, because you could have let our son, if you wanted to, try and take the rap for this. But I went and handed myself in. And I did admit to it as soon as I walked in. I took my solicitor's advice, and you go no comment, you wait to hear what evidence they've got, and make you move from there.
How soon after that did the police say, "We're arresting you, Jacob Dunne, on suspicion of murder"?
Instantly, as soon as I went in, they were like, "We're arresting you on the suspicion of murder." I was like, "What, murder? I haven't murdered anybody." And then it was just like, "Tell us what happened." And I was just out of it. I was just numb to the world. No idea what was going on. All I could know is I'm just sitting there saying no comment. And eventually I just stopped saying no comment. And it's just back in the cell, back out, back in the interview room, back in the cell. They're trying to break me and mentally. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? How am I going to, in my head, I'm like, how am I going to tell my mum that, because she's done the absolute best for me, do you know what I mean? And I've just let her down. Or how am I gonna, my life is, I didn't have any aspirations, but it definitely this wasn't the plan. And that was the first time where I was actually realizing that there was some level of standard of expectations for my life. They weren't very high, but I was like, fuck.
Did you tell your mum everything?
I told my mum, yeah, but she didn't believe me. She thought I was covering up for my mates. She's like, "Oh, it can't be you,
Not my Jacob.
not my Jacob."
Tell your brother?
No, I didn't tell my brother. Tried to keep him out of it.
How old? He's quite a lot younger than you.
Yeah, he's 7 years younger. Yeah, so he would have been
12, right.
Yeah, just going into secondary school.
One of the central scenes in the James Graham production, Punch, is the courtroom. And there's quite a lot, which I presume you had a hand in, or made of the fact that James Hodgkinson's mum doesn't go over and talk to your mum, which she later regrets.
Yeah.
But also, you don't make eye contact from the witness stand
No.
with Joan and David.
And one of the reasons for that is I didn't know who they were. So I'm just in a courtroom full of people. I know that within this courtroom full of people, journalists, whoever else is in there, every Tom, Dick and Harry from that's just being nosy that wants to come in. Within this room, there are the family of the person I'm responsible for killing. So I'm just like, I don't know who that is, so I don't want to catch anybody's eye. So I'm just like looking down at the floor and just like blank to the world.
Did you, at this point, know that it was manslaughter rather than murder?
At this point, the charge had been dropped to manslaughter and I'd pled guilty. That's the thing about restorative justice and victims, because in cases where people plead guilty, none of the facts come out. So they had if there was a lengthy trial, they would have been cross-examining me, what happened on the night leading up to the events. CCTV would have been shown in the courtroom. Do you know what I mean? All this stuff, you would have had doctors in and, everyone would have been like... And at the time, they were grateful that I went guilty to save them the trial and to be able to have the funeral and do everything that they needed to do to, at that time, what they needed. But then what happened is, as I was in prison, those questions that didn't come out in a trial...
Because they obviously
started ruminating.
And they have so many questions.
And there's so many victims out there that have these questions that only the offender can answer. Only the perpetrator can answer those questions. It doesn't matter how good the justice system is. It doesn't matter how long you lock someone away up for. It doesn't get rid of the questions. It doesn't remove, why did he pick my house? Why did they choose to rob me? How did they how did they burgle me? Or, what happened? That's the biggest question. Like, what happened or why me? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Those questions, it doesn't matter how good the justice system is, it's never going to be able to answer it. It's never going to be able to help them.
Well, those are questions that started to come out in a completely extraordinary exchange of letters, which you then sort of embarked on. Before that, you were in prison. What was prison like?
Horrible. It was at the time. It felt like there was moments in there where it just felt fun, and like being in an alternative provision, but you don't go home. You don't go home at the end of the day, like a school. For people, the listeners that don't know, an alternative provision is a place where people go, an alternative school for those that aren't in mainstream or get excluded. And so sometimes it felt like just being in school, and it was just all a bit of a big joke. But at the same time, it was horrible. You see people I've seen people dying there. I've seen people self-harming and trying to kill themselves, and all sorts of all the most vulnerable people. I remember this one young man, and he was so used to being homeless, he couldn't sleep on his mattress on his bed. Because he's just used to sleeping on a hard floor. He's like, I can't sleep on a mattress. He took his mattress off his bed and slept on the metal bed. And I was like, what are you doing? Sleep on your... He's like, I can't. I'm just used to sleeping on hard surfaces.
Huge amount of drugs in there.
Huge
spice.
Now, you look at independent monitoring boards and inspections, it ranges between 40 to 60%. Any prison across the country, if you look at an inspection report, between 40 and 60%, no matter what prison you pick, are on drugs. Have drugs in their system. How is that possible?
We've had the chief inspector.
Sometimes people go. I went in there. I'd never smoked. I came out smoking tobacco. Do you know what I mean? I'd never even been. I wasn't a smoker. I just smoked a bit of weed here and there, and sold it. But that came out full chain smoker. Obviously, they've banned tobacco in prisons now. It's all vaping, but. Back then, but the problem is now that people are going into prison and picking up drug addictions.
Of course,
this is insane,
and turning into career criminals.
Turning into career criminals. I think it's something like this weird statistic I read the other day. 80% of all crime is reoffending.
It is that, yeah.
80% of all crime is reoffending.
Why are prisons so ineffective at reducing reoffending? In other words, why is it, based on your experience at this prison, that people who go in are more likely to commit crimes and do things that are detrimental to communities and to society than they were before they went in?
Because they don't get their needs met.
So a lot of people would say, you know what, Jacob, your punch ended up with the death of someone. Criminals who are violent should be locked up. Yes, they've got needs, but what about the needs of their victims? We've been too soft on crime for too long in this country. If, I've got children, I want violent people who throw punches to be kept away from them for as long as possible.
I'd say, well, we can't live in a authoritarian. You don't want to live you want to live in a democratic, liberal society with freedoms, and you don't want to. We can't adopt the policy of just locking people up forever. Everybody's got to get out. So, do you want people coming out? Because like 90% or whatever it is of people will come out of prison. Do you want them to kill more people? Do you want them to create more victims? Do you want them to contribute to society or be a burden on society? That's the vital question. Do you want people in prison to contribute to society or be a burden on society? And the longer you have someone in prison, over 50 grand a year to the taxpayer, over 20 billion we pay for justice. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's insane.
Just also the daily impact of reoffending.
The daily impact of reoffending, the re-victimisation of people, the families that are broken down, the kids without fathers because they're in prison, the revolving door of intergenerational trauma, and because that's the real thing. Because we look at adults offending behaviour and go, oh my gosh, that's totally can't send them to prison. But behind every single one of those adults is like a traumatized child. But I'm not someone that makes excuses for people either. Like, a third of the prison population have been in care, but only 1% of the general population are in care. But at the heart of it, we're going back to the radical idea is the quality of the relationships. The quality of the relationships that people have in their lives defines the quality of their lives and the quality of their choices. So if we want to reduce harm, we need to look at society through the lens of relationships, and that means like taking a public health approach. That means trying to improve relationships wherever they are, and that means in the prison itself. Because the prison shouldn't be. People say you should having your liberty taken away from you is the punishment, but when you're there, it should be about okay, like how can we make sure there's some good relationships happening in this place. But if you're picking up drug addictions and like being exposed to violence all the time, and you have no healthy relationships going on in there, no one that's going to rub off on you in a good way, then it's just the same old loop.
It's worth saying what you're saying is, by the way, totally backed up by all science. So we know from behavioral economics and social psychology and all the psychology that you've studied that relationships and the ability to form good, meaningful, reciprocal relationships is the single biggest thing that sort of leads people towards fulfilling lives and happiness and meaning and purpose and all of that sort of stuff. That's got very big implications for young people and smartphones, by the way, because every time you're on a smartphone, you're not connecting with another human being, not properly anyway. It was while you were in prison that James's parents, David and Joan, took the decision to establish contact with you. And you've obviously had a chance to speak to them about that in later life. But the impulse for them, because they had all these unanswered questions, they wanted to connect with you and they wanted to reach out to you, didn't they?
Yeah, I think, they realised that me being in prison didn't actually make them feel any better. And they knew I was going to get out. And what actually mattered to them was that I was aware of the impact and the harm that I caused, and that and whether or not I could answer their questions as to what happened on the night, so they could try and make sense of, and try and find some sort of meaning or make some sense of what had happened and express the harm, and to make sure that I, hopefully didn't be one of those people we've been talking about, which most people are, which is the reoffending. And not learning from my mistakes and wasting, having 2 lives being lost essentially.
At what point did you decide that you wanted to pursue an education?
So I came out of prison, and then it was from when I heard from David and Joan, because they weren't allowed to contact me in prison, and then they made contact with me through my probation officer, when I got out of custody. And after some exchanges through a mediator, I answered all their questions, and then they asked me a follow-up question, which was, Jacob, what are you going to do with your life?
By letter.
Through a mediator. It wasn't even a letter. And just that act alone literally led to me sat here before you and a play on in the West End. Just the person I harmed the most, not even judging me the least, but at that moment, they were just curious about what I was going to do. And having the people who I'd caused such tragic harm to even take an interest in me made me want to take an interest in myself.
What was it like getting out of prison?
It was New Year's Eve. I don't know why they let me out on New Year's Eve, right?
He likes a party.
It was like 2012 to New Year's Eve. And yeah, and we went out with my friends. It felt a bit weird. And then I had no fixed address, and I was like sofa surfing. I had no idea. I had no plan. Like resettlement team, I could go into a resettlement team in prison, going like, I've got nowhere to live when I get out. Like, what's the plan? And it was just like, you know, we have a line in the play. You know, there's a word of caution, Jacob. There's a long queue to wait for housing, and there's no housing. Which has not changed, right? So
That I bet that always got when I watched the play, that got a big laugh.
yeah.
I mean, it's funny, but it's really also painfully not funny. At what point in this crazy story did you get the news about your mum?
So I start taking part in Restorative just as I come out. I'm homeless. Just
Why are you homeless? Can't you live with your mum?
well, I didn't want to move back in with my mum. She'd moved into this house, this rented accommodation place with my brother. My brother wasn't going to school, but no, the social services didn't flag it. School didn't report it, so he was just like a carer from home, looking after her.
I was like 15.
I was like 15 years old, yeah. Not even that, 14 years old. And then I came out of prison to this. And I was just like, what the hell's going on? And I was like, trying to sort my own life out, going around there trying to help her. I took her to the GP, and I said to the GP, like, please help my mum. Like, she's dying. And she's like, if your mum doesn't accept she's got a problem, then she can't get the help. And my mum would be like, oh, I'm only having, like, 2 glasses a day or whatever. I'm like,
You have 2 bottles.
you have 2 bottles, yeah. And she's just so deep into all addiction is an attempt. It's pain management to manage the pain that they're feeling emotionally. And
She had a lot of pain to manage.
she had a lot of pain to manage, yeah.
What happened at the end?
And then in the end, she turned yellow. She had jaundice, which was like a sign of liver failure. So I rang the ambulance. I was like, please, like, come and get it. And then the ambulance came, took her to the hospital. And then she was in hospital, and I was up there like every day, and social services got involved, and like, we're going to put this care plan in place for when your mum comes home, and she's going to get the support now. All the relevant people came to got involved. The doctors are telling me she's going to be fine. She's on drips. We're going to like stabilize her. Blah, blah, blah. So all the rest of my family stopped coming. I'd just be the one. I got a car by this point, passed my driving lesson. And I was going and I'm just started my GCSEs again, and so like trying to sort myself out and try and support her. And then I was going up there every day and just like letting the family know she's all right, And then all of a sudden I got a phone call from the doctor. It's like on a Friday. She'd been in the hospital a week, and they're like, Jacob, you need to come in. She's not going to make it past the weekend. I'm like, what? You just you told me she was going to be fine. Like, everyone thinks she's coming home, and we're all going to get the help that we need.
What was that? Was she developing infections? Or?
And then she'd liver just completely failed, shut down. Body stopped working. The rest of her vital organs started failing.
Did you get to see her before she died?
Yeah, I was there with her the last 24 hours.
Why did you not want that scene to be in the play? Because I'd have thought that must be one of the moments where you decide that you want to make something of your life.
Well, do you know, because I was already in a relationship with David and Joan. I hadn't met them, but I was in communication with them, and they were telling me about their son and the harm I caused. But as a 21-year-old, I'd never experienced grief.
Mm.
And then I've got my mum in my arms, you know what I mean, that dies. And that was the first time I'd like felt a similar pain. And it made me have more empathy for David and Joan. That was the first time I experienced like how it's not like losing a child, but this is as close as I'm probably going to be able to realistically put myself in their shoes in terms of what it feels like. And I was like, fuck. So it gave me more empathy towards them as well.
Was your brother with you?
My brother was there, yeah.
Because he, looking after him, you sort of became a parent in that moment in a weird sort of way. Obviously,
I became his guardian, yeah.
there's a big age gap or whatever, but sorting him out, because he's only, 15 at this time, is a big deal. So you've got a hell of a lot going on. You've got this relationship with David and Joan.
I'm starting to study my GCSEs again.
And where did the impulse to study your GCSEs come from?
It came from Joan and David asking me, what are you going to do with your life? And like, I literally had no other option. As someone coming out of prison with no GCSEs, no work experience, no CV, like it was just like, you gotta get GCSEs before you can even go on another course. You just need your maths and English. So I was like, I'll do that. I'll go back to college. And I'm so grateful that I studied. I picked 3 GCSEs. I did English, maths, and psychology. And psychology is like, that was such an important subject for me to study at that time, because we were talking earlier about young people and why they end up being so pessimistic. And what we're talking about is like social learning and conditioning of people and how they form the views that they have and the limiting values and the beliefs that they have. And I was looking at the world and going like, my mum's just died. I'm a carer for my little brother. And that's another thing, having responsibilities. Because when you go to prison, it strips you of all your responsibilities. And we want people in prison to be responsible. But we strip them of all their responsibilities. And it's like, well, naturally, we want them to come out. We want them to pay bills. We want them to pay taxes. We want them to have a job. We want them to have responsibilities and be able to meet those responsibilities. So I was given a responsibility of caring for my little brother, which was like, I can't go back to prison. And, you know, my little brother goes into care.
What's he going to do? Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so that was like something that's a deterrent. Giving people responsibilities, giving people something to lose, not stripping everything off them, so they've got nothing to lose.
What results did you get in your GCSEs?
I got an A star in psychology. I got an A star in English. And I got a C in maths.
Rubbish at maths, man. What happened there? You loser! What's the matter? Can't you? Where's your mental arithmetic? Simultaneous equations not your thing.
No.
That is rubbish.
Just enough to like work out like profits and if I buy £100 of this stuff.
So maths not your strong point, but you got 2 A stars. Absolutely amazing. There's a lesson there, by the way, for everyone listening in who cares about education, about how it is a weird thing that most human societies do, which is that they cram education into this very particular bit of your life, and we don't
Very
think
particular
moment
way of delivering
when
it.
you've got other things going on,
yeah.
and actually, as everyone who then studies this subject ends up concluding, you should make education a lifelong thing. So you got your GCSEs, all owing, and the fact you're here, all owing to this one question, which is Joan and David saying to you through a mediator, what do you want to do with your life?
What are you going to do with your life now?
What are you going to do with your life? Which is obviously, it's a very poignant moment, obviously, in the play as well. And meanwhile, your communication with them, which is part of the restorative justice idea and process, is escalating. And one day, someone suggests a face-to-face meeting.
So originally, they just wanted their questions answered, and I answered their questions, got their needs met. And that can be restorative justice in a nutshell. It doesn't even have to be face-to-face. It can just be asking the questions that you need answered, and then that's it, done. But David and Joan then wanted to find out more about me.
Is it always up
wanted
to
me
the victim's family to sort of get to that level? And
It's just always led by the needs of everyone involved and what they want. And if it's safe to do so, then you'll proceed based on the needs of everyone. The practitioners are just neutral people mediators whose sole intention is to make sure fundamentally that the victims get their needs met and they have their voice heard.
And they find neutral ground. So I think it was in Norfolk or something.
Yeah, it was in neutral ground. So we were communicating, and they said, keep us updated with how you're getting on, Jacob, because it's important to us that you don't slip off and, you know, end up like everybody else, and true lives aren't lost. So I had that as my motivator. I was like, I can't let David and Joan down. I can't let my brother down, who I'm now caring for. I can't let my mum down. My last words to her were, I'm going to make you proud. And then my goal from the restorative justice process was, one day I want to be able to look in the mirror and say I'm proud of myself. That was my goal. So I got all these kind of like responsibilities, expectations, people, like huge people in my life that I'm like making promises to, right? And so one on a deathbed, one whose son I've killed, you know, my brother who's living with me. So I'm like, right. So I finished my GCSEs. And I'm like, wow, oh my gosh, all this time I thought I was thick. That's the word that people gave me, right? I was not academic. And now all of a sudden I've just dispelled this myth that people had conditioned me to believe.
You start getting some self-belief.
And I'm like, I started getting some self-belief. I started going, wow, like what else is not true? Do you know what I mean? Like who's been telling me all this? So I'm like, ceilings are getting smashed, right? And I'm just like having these like epiphanies and like looking at everything around me, like, wow, like there's so much to learn, like there's like history and
books and
knowledge, and I'm like, what the hell, like this is crazy, right? It's just like I'm being reborn, right? And I'm just like loving life and learning. I've got the bug for learning and how amazing learning is, and like the passion for learning and acquiring knowledge.
Because you went
being
on
more informed
beyond GCSEs, you should.
Yeah, I went on to do an access course, and then I got a place at university to study criminology.
How did that go?
That went good. I got a first class honours in criminology.
Thank God for that after your maths GCSE.
I know. I had to do research methods, right? There was some maths involved in that, right? So, and
Jacob Dunne has got a first class honours, which you achieve while doing a sort of part-time course? You also working?
I was doing a full-time course. My attendance was 20% over 4 years. I had a child as well in that time, and I got a first class honours. Because I was working in youth centres, I was doing the school work, I was working with Joan at this point. Because this is whilst I'm at uni. But when I applied for university, David and Joan were like, we want to meet you. Like, because you've said, like, the proof's in the pudding. Like, you're not just like talking the talk, you're walking the walk. So they said, and I said to them, I don't want to say sorry to you, I want to prove to you through my actions that I'm going to change my life. I'm going to try and do the best that I can to make sure that your needs are met, that you can be confident that I'm not going to repeat anything like this again. And then they were like, yeah, let's meet, let's have a conversation face to face. Once I got a place at university, and then we met face to face, and then I went on to then, get the first class honours and write a book. And
on that drive, I mean, to this neutral terrain mediator, and it's obviously an absolute central pillar of the idea of restorative justice, the potential for this face-to-face meeting.
Yeah.
What were your kind of emotions on that drive? I mean,
well, the strange thing is like I was driving to meet people that I'd like been in dialogue with on and off for 2.5 years. That had changed my worldview and triggered a chain reaction of choices in me that had got me from likely to reoffend, traumatized 19, 20-year-old, just got out of prison with no hope, prospects. Most people probably just written me off, to being a dad, educated, I'm not going to blow my own trumpet, but, just like a normal civilian, right? Who was responsible and, cared about other people and was compassionate and wanted to put good back in the world. And I never met them. I'd never met them. And I was driving to meet these people who had completely changed my life, and I'd never even met them. And I was just a strange feeling of going there and going, like, I can't believe how much respect I've got for these people, how much of an impact these people have had in my life just by asking me questions.
But did you go in there with a specific plan to say sorry? And did you go in there thinking at all, because it's quite an important scene in the play, about whether or not you're going to shake David's hand in particular?
The thing about restorative justice is it's the practitioner's job to make sure, beyond reasonable doubt, that there's no surprises. So everything is talked about. And we try to get that across in the play. That's why we have that meticulously planned. You got, who's going to talk first? What are we going to talk about? Who's going to be in the room? How would you feel if someone responded this way? So you know all the questions. You know what everyone's going to say, or you can, and you've been prepped to have thought through every type of response that someone could.
Because they look at you, but you can't in the play. By the way, I'm not suggesting this is easy. But you can't look at them for a very long time, and then there's a giveaway. There's a funny comic moment where something happens, which kind of, as it were, literally sort of breaks the ice. But in the real meeting, do you remember if you were hesitant to make eye contact?
Yeah, I was hesitant to make eye contact. The same as when I was hesitant in the courtroom. I was hesitant to make eye contact with most people. Up until I started believing in myself and started realising that I was worthy of my own love, that I was more, that I could maybe be proud of myself, that I could maybe be confident and have self-belief.
There's a pretty clear distinction or divide, really, as well, between David and Joan in one sense. If people listen back, as they definitely should, to the Radio 4 series, they'll know David features very prominently in it, and he says that he has the utmost respect for you and how you turned your life around. He thinks you're immensely admirable person, actually sort of basically an inspirational person. And just talking to you as I have done today, it's not hard to see why he says that. But he also says that he can't and won't forgive you.
Yeah.
Joan takes a different view. She regrets not talking to your late mum, who she saw in the courtroom, because she had the compassion and the grace to realise that it must have been extraordinarily tough for her, and she does forgive you. Does it give you a sort of sadness now? I mean, in a 15-year cycle of events that you must have thought about endlessly, but does it give you a certain sadness that David is unable to forgive you?
No. Because I respect his decision. And if Joan turned around tomorrow and said she doesn't want to forgive me, that would be fine as well. Because I don't want my choices to be dependent on somebody else's forgiveness. I think that we can all, and there's a danger with forgiveness that because I've been in prisons and I've seen forgiveness get talked about, or like people know that I've been forgiven by one of the parents, and they'll go, "Oh, I need forgiveness in order to move forward, in order to change." And I'm like, "No, you don't. Like, don't give away your agency to somebody else. Like, you are in control of your choices, and you can't defer that to anybody else. Even no matter how nice it would be, at the end of the day, you're responsible for your own choices, and you got to sleep in the bed you make."
It's an interesting question of whether Joan, whose forgiveness is no doubt sincere, but is that forgiveness something she says for your benefit or for hers?
I think the clue's in the word, but it's the opposite way around, I guess. So it's forgiving, right? But it's like, who are you forgiving it to? And a lot of the time, people resent forgiveness because they think it is forgiving to somebody else. Like, if I was to forgive you, for
It's an act of
doing
generosity.
It's an act of generosity to bestow on the other person, when actually you're giving yourself a gift when you're forgiving someone else. Because like Joan says, the thing that she's gained the most from restorative justice is that she's no longer stuck in anger and resentment and bitterness and me living rent free in her head. Do you know what I mean? As this mugshot young man, like she's been able to move on, she's been able to move forward, and the freedom that comes with that.
And that, in moral terms, never.
And that's what forgiveness might look like, is no longer having that person who's harmed you causing you discomfort.
And that, in moral terms, is perhaps the strongest case, I guess you would say, for restorative justice. Yeah, never mind the reoffending rates and all the rest of it. For people that have been who are in enormous pain, in enormous grief, it's something that can make them genuinely feel. It doesn't cure it, but it can make them feel a little bit better. I've got two questions which lean a little bit on your first-class degree, which is to say your knowledge of psychology, which goes way, way, way beyond mine. The first is there something, dare I say it, a little bit, this is too easy to say because it's too broad a term, but Freudian, in the fact that Joan lost a son, but through you gained one? Is there something kind of profound about the fact that in the midst of that unbearable pain and sadness and sorrow, which she will never get over, it's not that you in any way replace James, you're not a substitute, whatever, but there was a kind of loving hole in her life, and she bestowed, because of her generosity and grace, some of that love on you?
I think it's simpler than that, and I think it's that everybody needs meaning and purpose in their life, and if you can find meaning and purpose in the darkest of times, then that's the antidote to trying to move forward.
It's almost pragmatic.
It's almost pragmatic, yeah. And it would, like I say, we've turned a mess into a message, and that is healing. If you can find meaning in the chaos, if you can find meaning in the madness, you can find a way forward. Whether it's religious, like there's a lot of people in prison that turn to Islam or turn to Christianity because it gives them meaning, gives them a purpose, a way of getting through the days without, not that I'm not questioning their faith or legitimacy of the reason why they've turned to religion, because it probably is very legitimate. You know what I mean? I don't want to question someone's faith, but whatever works for you in terms of giving you some meaning and purpose and belonging and a community and a family to be around ticks all the boxes, and will help people heal, and will bridge the divides and help resolve trauma.
I'm smiling because I've written down in my notes faith. And the second question I was going to ask you, which is partly leaning on your psychological study, is forgiveness. It's not a uniquely Christian idea, but it's central to the Christian teaching. And I just wonder whether or not either you or Joan are religious, not necessarily saying you're Christian, but are religious, and whether or not that's kind of a part
Whether
of the
it's
story.
played a part, yeah. I'm not happy to say this, but we're not, and I think that sometimes gives more weight to the story, because there isn't a religious explanation for why forgiveness has been found. We've just arrived there as two.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, general people that have just got there. But I do think that faith is a very, very important thing for human society and existence.
Religion seems to answer enduring human needs in a way that secular thought seems to struggle with.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, there's going to be a lot of people listening to this who've got different connections to the justice system. One thing just for victims, it might be some people listening to this who've heard the Jacob Dunne story, they've seen Punch, maybe you don't know them personally, but maybe they lost someone who's a victim of one punch or in similar circumstances, and they're thinking about restorative justice. What would be your direct message to them about why engaging in a dialogue and possibly even a face-to-face meeting with the person that they are most unforgiving of or most angry towards is a constructive thing to do?
I think in the play, to reference the play again, because it's kind of how we try to explain this, is the character of Joan. She says, I want to be the best version of myself, and I don't think James would recognise the person that I'm becoming, because I'm stuck and we're stuck. She's having a dialogue with David, the two parents, they're divorced and they're not together, and they're having this conversation. And David, like he did in real life, he had nightmares, and he couldn't sleep, and he was getting more angry, and Joan was feeling more stuck and becoming a woman that she didn't recognise anymore, and there was no way, like hating me wasn't helping them, and the only and there was these questions and that I could only answer, that seemed to be the only way forward to try and help them move on. And I would imagine that there are many people out there that feel stuck, that don't feel like the justice system has given them a voice or really listened to their needs and what's keeping them up at night, years or days, months after whatever's happened, sadly happened to them. And me, as someone who knows the impact, like I've had to sit there opposite David and Joan, be told about their son, see the pain in their eyes. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I'm so passionate about fighting for victims' rights, because I know the pain in that victims are going through, and I want them to be heard. I want them to have every opportunity, even if restorative justice isn't for them. I want them all to know that it is an option for them and that it can help them potentially. And so that's what I would like them to think about, is it could help you become unstuck. It could help you get questions answered that, you know, otherwise won't be answered. And they might be able to help you move forward and become a version of yourself that you might have lost, or that you're a new version of yourself that you could be, and be able to move forward in a positive way. And I think if anybody objects to victims being able to have that opportunity, then I don't really know what kind of justice system they're wanting.
Well, and I think you've made a very clear case to people in politics or in justice, the civil service or the judicial system, about the potential benefits as well in terms of reducing reoffending and so on. I wonder if you could just convey your message to the future Jacob Dunnes. You know, one of the things that we're living through is this idea of a crisis of masculinity, toxic masculinity, young people losing their purpose and all that. And I want to talk about the people living in the meadows today, really. My overwhelming feeling of kind of affection and compassion for people, boys and girls, whatever, who don't have the best start in life and just need someone. Maybe it could be that one role model or that one meeting, that one inspirational person. It could be that one program where they think, I could be that person.
Yeah.
What would you say to those kids in the meadows now? You know, what do you want them to know about what you've learned? Not only the danger of one terrible punch,
one action, how quickly everything can change,
but also that there's a life outside of there.
There's a life outside the bubble, outside the postcode, that's just waiting to be explored.
But what we're talking about is the intensity of postcodes. And actually, it's one of the things I feel very, very strongly, and I try and bring to the rest of my career, is that we don't really talk about the fact that most people in Britain, most kids live in those sorts of circumstances.
Yeah.
Most
in those
kids,
bubbles.
Yeah, intense, tough, small, territorial, often dangerous bubbles.
Yeah.
And they're getting more dangerous and more separate from the rest of society, the sort of society you hear about on the news.
They're drifting off. The bubbles are drifting off, as they do when they're in the wind. And eventually they pop, right? And it's when it pops, it goes pop, and it's pretty bad. But we need to pop those bubbles and let them see that there is a life out there.
There's adventures and experience and connections.
And that's what we're trying to do with the play. So I don't know if you realise that the show's not for profit. All the funds are going to go back into making it accessible when we do a national tour. We've got subsidised school matinees, £10 tickets for children from the most deprived areas in London that have been coming. We've got
I saw a huge number of kids when I came.
Yeah.
Is it the Apollo Theatre?
It's at the Apollo Theatre, yeah.
Listen, what do you want to do with your life?
You're asking me that same question I was asked.
I've done this before, you know.
You're asking me the question Joan asked me 11, 12 years ago. That changed everything. I just want to help people get beyond bubbles. I want to help people become unstuck. I want to create more constructive conversations in society, move people beyond binary debates and divisive conversations, beyond the sound bites into a longer form conversation, to build a community of common grounders, as I'd like to call them.
That's the name of your
That's the name of
foundation, charity.
the charity that David and Joan have helped us form and are now senior advisors to, which seeks to bridge the divide. We're not a political, we're not politically affiliated. We want to give everybody a voice, and we're on the journey now to performing a national listening exercise, because I think we have a listening crisis. That's what I would say that we have in our country. We have a listening crisis. Young people don't feel heard. Red wall seats don't feel heard. People are defecting into reform. Not that there's anything wrong with reform. You know, like there's a everything that we're seeing is all an issue with listening. We're not listening, and that's why the Common Ground Justice Project, we've started our first campaign to be listening to victims of crime, and we want to give all victims of crime the right to be heard. And then we're on a campaign to find the common ground and move beyond the soundbite polarised debate on crime, and actually figure out what the public really wants from justice. So we're polling, we're doing national listening exercise, really, because the reason the justice system hasn't moved on and we haven't reformed in any way that brings justice to victims or reduces reoffending or solves the prison population crisis is because we don't listen to the public, and we don't know what the public want, and so we're indecisive and we don't really make any bold choices.
So one of the biggest lessons I've taken from your life lessons, maybe I just heard it like this because I agree with it, is about the power of connections and the power of relationships.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to get right at an early stage. What's your kind of overarching feeling now, or emotion, when you think back to that night? Is it regret? Is it shame? Is it thinking about the counterfactual?
I'm
sure it's a mix.
It's a mix, yeah. Like sometimes I feel proud of like what we've been able to achieve, to like bring this issue to like a global stage, and because there's been times like I've been sharing this story for a long time. I've had faith in this story for a long time. Like even the Punch radio series was commissioned like 5 years ago, and I was sharing my story before that in like school assembly halls, and people were going, "Jacob, when are you going to shut up? Like stop." You know, I'm like, well, if it doesn't apply to you, you know, then don't listen, right? But there's going to be a young person out here, or there's going to be a parent, or there's going to be, you know, someone who's in prison listening, or, you know, whatever it is, like, and I've had faith in it. But so sometimes I feel proud, and sometimes I just feel really, really desperately sad that I'll never be able to truly change anything that happened. And that's the juxtaposition of life, isn't it? Really, it's amazingly beautiful and tragic all at once.
Both things can be true at the same time. Let me end by just asking a couple of questions about relationships. How's your bro getting on?
Oh, I'm so proud of my little bro.
He's thriving.
He's thriving. He's doing really well. And you know, in some metrics, he's doing better than me, and I love that. So we have this healthy competition now, and brotherly love of, you know, pushing each other to do better. But, you know, the most important thing to me is just that we have a good relationship, and he's well and happy.
Well, he's not been on Britain's Hottest Podcast, so you've got that on him. How do you think about the great silent or invisible relationship in all this story, which is your relationship with James Hodgkinson? He's a lifelong partner to you.
Yeah, we're now forever, as me and David and Joan. If anything, this has all taught me that we're all connected, whether we like it or not. We can all sit there and, you know, have our social media accounts and, you know, try and wear the best brands and have the nicest car and live an individualistic life, but we're all connected, and we'll all forever be connected with the people that we experience life with. And so I just want to make sure that the people that I come across and have experiences with, I try my best to have a positive influence on them or a positive impact on them.
You've come a long way since July 2011, man. You've come a long way. It's a truly a real privilege as well as a pleasure to chat to you. Jacob Dunne, thank you so much for coming in and joining us on Radical.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Radical with Amol Rajan featuring Jacob Dunne. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, there is a new episode every single week, and if you want to listen to this as a podcast on the move, all you've got to do is download the BBC Sounds app, search for Radical with Amol Rajan, hit subscribe, and make sure your push notifications are turned on. I'll be back at the same time with a new episode of Radical with Amol Rajan this time next week. But until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.